The mail sack came up from the depot at 6, same as it did 6 mornings out of 7, and Nora Blythe heard the wagon before she saw it. A particular uneven creak old Tobias Wren's rig had carried for as long as she'd held this position. 3 years now, long enough that she could tell his wagon from any other on the road with her eyes still half shut. She was down the back stairs and into the store before the wagon had properly stopped, apron already tied, the morning fire in the little stove already drawing well enough to take the chill off the front room, and by the time Tobias came through the door with the sack over one shoulder, she had the counter cleared and the sorting case open and waiting. "Cold one," he said, which was what he said most mornings between October and April, setting the sack down with the small grunt of a man 20 years into the same motion. "It'll warm by 10. It generally does." She untied the sack and began, the letters coming out in a loose tumble that her hand sorted into order almost before her mind had properly looked at them. A habit built up over 3 years of mornings just like this one. The little pigeonholes behind a counter, each labeled for a family or a farm, along the 4 roads that met in the village, close to 60 slots for a town that did not, by the county's own count, hold 300 souls. Tobias took his coffee standing, the same cup he took every morning, poured without being asked, and was gone again within 10 minutes, to finish his round to the next town over, and Nora was left alone with the quiet, purposeful business of putting a morning's worth of the outside world into its proper order. The store opened at 7, though in practice it opened whenever the first customer came through the door, which most mornings was old Mrs. Pruitt from the farm on Cobble Hill Road, arriving on foot with her market basket and her particular unhurried opinions about the weather. "Anything for me?" "A letter from your daughter in Concord and the seed catalog you've been asking after since January." Nora had them both ready before Mrs. Pruitt had finished unwinding her scarf, because a postmistress who made her customers wait while she searched a sorting case twice a week was a postmistress who heard about it gently but persistently until she improved. The store itself sat at the exact crossing of the 4 roads, which was the whole reason for its existence in that spot and had been since Nora's predecessor first hung the shingle some 30 years before. A plain 2-story building with the post office and dry goods sharing the front room and Nora's own rooms above, the church visible from the front window a 1/4 mile up the north road, and beyond it nothing but white fields and the dark line of the tree country climbing toward the hills. On a clear morning like this one, she could see smoke standing up from a dozen farmhouse chimneys scattered across that white distance, each one a household whose letters would sooner or later pass through her own 2 hands. Mrs. Pruitt took her letter and settled by the stove to read it on the spot, as she generally did, and Nora went on to the store side of the counter because the post office was only half of what this room was, and the other half, the dry goods, the penny candy in its glass jars, the bolts of calico, and the tins of tobacco, and the bags of flour stacked along the back wall, asked just as much of her attention as the mail did, sometimes more. The morning went the way most mornings went, a little of everything, all of it wanting doing in its own time. She weighed out coffee beans for the Hollis place and wrote the sum in her ledger. She sold a spool of blue thread and 2 ounces of peppermints to a girl sent on an errand by her mother, and gave her 1 extra peppermint free, a small unbook-kept kindness, that Nora had decided long ago was simply part of the overhead of running a store in a town small enough that everyone in it was, in one fashion or another, already family to her. She weighed a parcel for the widow Emery bound for a grandson out west, wrote out the postage careful and exact, and took the coins and made change from the little drawer that lived, as it had for 3 years, exactly where her own hand expected it without her needing to look. Around 9, the Harmon boy came in wanting 3 cents worth of stamps and lingered a good deal longer than 3 cents worth of business generally required, turning over first one thing and then another on the counter with the particular restlessness of a boy working up to a question. "Something else, Charlie? Is there—" He stopped, started again. "Is there any word from Fort Ethan Allen? For my brother, I mean. He'd have written by now if he was going to." Nora had, in fact, sorted that very letter not 40 minutes before, and set it in its place, and she reached for it now with the particular care she gave to a piece of mail she knew mattered more than its weight would suggest. "He wrote," she said, and put it in the boy's hand, and watched something in his shoulders come loose that had plainly been drawn tight since some time the previous week. "Tell your mother I asked after her garden when you see her." "I will." He was nearly out the door before he remembered to say thank you, which he did over his shoulder, already half running, and Nora went back to her ledger with the small private satisfaction that came more often than she'd have guessed when she first took the position, from being the one who got to hand a boy his brother's letter. The middle of the day brought the heavier custom, farmers' wives in for their week's flour and sugar, a traveling drummer wanting to know the best road north and buying a paper of pins, while he asked 2 men from the mill stopping in for their tobacco in the news, such as it was, which mostly concerned whose cow had gotten into whose corn and what the weather meant to do about the roads. Nora kept the ledger running in her head nearly as fast as she kept it running on paper, weighing and measuring and making change with the same unhurried economy of motion she brought to the mail. And between customers, she sorted the last of the morning's letters into their slots, and swept the floor once at noon out of long habit rather than strict necessity, and ate her own dinner, standing at the end of the counter, bread and cheese and an apple, ready to set it down the instant the bell over the door announced anybody wanting anything. The afternoon brought Mr. Kellerman in with a money order to send off to a supplier in Boston, careful business that wanted her full attention and the proper forms filled correct the first time. And she gave it that attention, and he left satisfied, and behind him came a stretch of a slower hour, where the store held only the tick of the stove and the particular hush of a winter afternoon, with the light already beginning by 3 to lean toward evening. She used the quiet hour to restock the candy jars from the tin and back, and to write up her weekly order for the wholesaler in the city: flour, coffee, kerosene, a bolt of the blue calico that had sold better than she guessed it would, and to sort the small stack of outgoing mail into the pouch that would go back down to the depot with Tobias in the morning, each letter checked once more against her own count before she trusted it to the sack. Mrs. Colby came in not long after Mr. Kellerman left, wrapped in her good shawl against the cold, with the particular brisk purposefulness of a woman about Grange business, which in this town meant the winter supper the ladies' committee put on every February without fail, rain or shine, or 3 feet of snow on the roads. "I'll want 12 pounds of flour set aside, and don't let Ashby talk you out of the last of the good coffee before Saturday. He'll try. I've already set 2 pounds aside with your name on it, in the back. Bless you. Mrs. Colby unfolded a list nearly as long as her forearm and went down it item by item. And Nora matched each line against the shelves and the ledger both, the two of them working through it together with the easy efficiency of two women who had done this exact dance the winter before and the winter before that. Sugar and the good tea and a length of ribbon for the table decorations and a full pound of raisins for Mrs. Colby's own particular spice cake, which by local consensus wanted no improving upon and had not changed a single ingredient in 11 years running. "You'll come yourself this year," Mrs. Colby said, not quite a question, folding her list away. "Last February, you were 3 days behind on the mail from that ice storm and never made it past the door." "I'll come. I've already told Tobias to carry the Friday sack a little heavier so Saturday's lighter." "See that you do. A postmistress who never sits down at her own town supper is a postmistress the town starts to worry over." It was said lightly, but Nora understood the small kindness folded inside it, the way she understood most of what this town said to her sideways rather than straight on, and she promised again, more firmly, and meant it. The bell rang once more before Mrs. Colby had properly gone, and a boy from the Ashby farm came in stamping snow from his boots, holding out a small brown package with the particular two-handed care of someone who has been told exactly how important a thing is and is determined not to be the one who drops it. "Registered, Miss Blythe. Grandmother said to bring it straight and not dawdle." Nora took it with the same care he'd carried it, checked the seal, and walked him through the small ceremony of a registered parcel, his mark in her book beside her own, the weight and the fee written out proper. The whole business no more than 2 minutes, but conducted on both their parts, with the gravity the boy so plainly felt it deserved. "There," she said, when it was done and safely shelved behind the counter to go out with tomorrow's pouch. "Safe as a bank vault till it leaves my hands, and safe as one after, too." He left considerably more pleased with himself than he'd arrived, and Nora logged the parcel in its proper place in the registry, the careful, particular handwriting she kept for that book alone, and returned to the quieter rhythm of the afternoon. By 4, the light outside had gone the pale gold of a winter afternoon nearly spent, and the last customers of the day drifted through in ones and twos, a girl for her mother's thread, a farmer for a paper and a plug of tobacco, old Mr. Ashby, who came most days near closing simply to sit by the stove a while and say very little, which Nora had come to understand as its own kind of visiting, and never once begrudged him. She closed the door at 6, turned the little sign, and set about the evening's business the way she set about it every evening, banking the stove down to a bed of coals that would hold through the night and catch quick again in the morning, counting the day's take against the ledger and finding it, as it generally did, correct to the penny, and straightening the last of the shelves that customers' hands had disturbed through the day. Her own rooms were above the store, reached by a narrow stair at the back, and she climbed it now with the particular loosening of shoulders that came at the end of any working day into a small, warm space that held a bed, a stove of its own already laid and waiting, a chair and a writing desk beneath the single window that looked out over the darkening road. She lit the lamp, fed the stove, and sat a while with a cup of tea before she took up her pen, because Thursday was the evening she wrote to her sister in Manchester, a habit kept as faithfully as the mail itself. And she told her about the cold, and about Mrs. Pruitt's letter from Concord, and about the Harmon boy and his brother's letter from Fort Ethan Allen, though she did not say how the boy's shoulders had come loose when she handed it to him, because some things belonged to the moment they happened in and did not properly translate to paper. She sealed it and set it by the door to go down with tomorrow's outgoing pouch, and sat a while longer by the lamp with nothing particular in her hands, listening to the stove tick and settle and the wind move once, quietly, along the eaves. Somewhere below her, in the dark store, the sorting case stood with its 60 small compartments empty now and waiting, patient as it was every night, for tomorrow's sack and tomorrow's uneven wagon creak on the road, and the whole quiet cycle of letters finding their way from one hand to another that she had spent 3 years, one ordinary day at a time, learning to keep. She banked her own small stove, blew out the lamp, and got into bed. The sheets cold at first and then not, her body carrying the day in it, the plain, honest way it always did. The low ache across her shoulders from the counter and the ledger, the particular tiredness that came from being needed, gently and continuously, by 60 families at once. She thought, without any urgency, of tomorrow, the Thursday order to be checked against what arrived, whether the seed catalogues would come before the ground was fit to use them, whether Mr. Ashby would want his usual quiet hour by the stove. It arranged itself in the proper order, and then asked nothing further of her. Outside, the village lay dark and quiet along its 4 roads, and the wind moved once more against the window and eased, and Nora Blythe's eyes closed, and the whole small town slept around her the way it slept every night, waiting, as it always waited, for the mail wagon and the morning.